My husband punched my pregnant sister. Then the truth exploded. 50 people were packed into my parents' living room, plastic cups clinking, cameras flashing, and pastel balloons strung across the ceiling. It was supposed to be my sister's big day, her baby shower. 8 months pregnant, dressed in a soft blue dress, she glowed under the attention. At least that's what everyone thought. Then it happened. My husband walked across the room straight at her. I thought maybe he was going to hug her, crack a joke, do something brother-in-law appropriate. Instead, his fist shot forward with the kind of force you only see in slow motion. He punched my pregnant sister square in the stomach. The sound was sickening, a dull thud followed by the crash of the gift table tipping backward. Wrapping paper scattered across the carpet. Guests screamed. My grandmother clutched her chest. My aunt dragged her kids toward the door. My sister folded in half, shrieking, and crumpled to the ground, clutching her belly as if her baby might fall out right there. I lunged at my husband, nails out, shoving him against the wall. What is wrong with you? Are you insane? My voice cracked into something feral. Behind me, my mother was already on the phone, sobbing into 911 about assaulting a pregnant woman. My brothers had my husband pinned, their fists cocked, ready to end him. I was screaming 2 words tumbling out. Psychopath. Murderer. You just attacked my sister's baby. And then his voice strangled and desperate. Look at her stomach where I hit her. It's not what you think. The room froze, a silence heavier than the screaming before it. All eyes fell on my sister. She was curled around herself, moaning, but something was wrong. Where her belly should have been round, there was a dent. A deep, unnatural dent that didn't bounce back. I blinked, disoriented. It looked like someone had pressed their hand into memory foam. I reached her before she could scramble away. My hand shook as I pressed against the spot, and instead of life, instead of the shifting kick of a baby, I felt edges. Hard, rubbery, man-made edges. Velcro straps. Not skin, not muscle, not pregnancy. God, I whispered, jerking my hand back like it had touched fire. It's fake. Gasps filled the room. People swarmed, pulling at the dress. Straps slipped loose, foam bulged out. The blue fabric snagged on the floor. My sister thrashed, screaming, "Don't touch me," like an animal caught in a trap. And that's when my husband, still straining against the men holding him, shouted louder. She's been faking it. Different bellies for different months. Stolen ultrasounds. $30,000 scammed for medical bills that never existed. She was never pregnant. I wanted to deny it. Scream that he was lying. But my sister's hands told the truth. They weren't cradling life. They were clinging to straps. I looked at her face. Not the glowing mother-to-be, but something else. Rage, cornered, fury, humiliation. 30 years of knowing her, and I had never seen that face. Behind me, phones kept recording. My grandmother whispered a prayer. My mother sobbed into the receiver. My father just stood there, pale and shaking his hands, opening and closing like he wanted to fight and collapse all at once. I crouched beside the foam belly, still strapped to her waist. My voice broke as I asked the only question that mattered. Why? But she didn't answer. She just hissed. You ruined everything. And for the first time in my life, I realized my sister might be capable of something far darker than lies. The straps came off in violent jerks. Velcro ripped loud as gunfire, and the belly she'd carried for 8 months deflated on the carpet like some grotesque balloon. A lump of beige foam tumbled out, dented where my husband's fist had landed. Gasps echoed off the walls. Phones rose higher, everyone filming. My cousin whispered, "Oh my God," over and over like a chant. My sister clutched at the fake padding, trying to shove it back under her dress. But the crowd wasn't fooled anymore. My husband's voice cut through the chaos. Check her laptop. Her search history is nothing but fake bellies, forged ultrasounds, pregnancy forums she stole from. I saw it all. He was trembling, sweat pouring down his temples, but his eyes burned with conviction. No, he's lying. My sister shrieked, scrambling backward on her knees. He's obsessed. He's jealous. But the more she spoke, the more people noticed. The edges of her dress were bunched where the straps had slipped loose. The foam belly was dented and twisted at her feet, a sad parody of motherhood. My aunt pressed her hands to her mouth. My uncle barked into his phone, already talking about pressing charges. My mother collapsed into a chair, sobbing, mascara streaking her cheeks. I wanted to scream at my husband to demand how he knew all this. But instead, I stared at my sister. The lies started unraveling faster than she could patch them. Yesterday, she said she had an OB appointment. My husband shouted, straining against my brother's grip. I followed her. She went to a bar for 2 hours drinking cocktails while everyone thought she was getting a checkup. Shut up, she screamed, her voice splitting the air like glass breaking. He didn't stop. She bought 3 new bellies from a costume shop downtown. Different sizes, different months. She's been faking the whole timeline. I could feel the room shifting, the pity for my sister turning into horror. Guests murmured, shaking their heads, some already backing away like she was contagious. And then the final blow, he pulled out his phone. She left her laptop at our house last week. I saw everything. Search history full of stolen ultrasound photos, instructions on how to fake morning sickness, how to forge medical receipts. $30,000 gone. The foam belly sat there like Exhibit A in a trial. My sister's boyfriend, pale and trembling, stared at it, as if the ground had been yanked out from under him. Baby, he whispered, voice cracking. Tell me this isn't true. She looked at him with wild eyes, chest heaving, then snapped. You don't understand. None of you do. I did this for us. But the words sounded hollow, falling flat against the sound of sirens already closing in. I stood rooted to the floor, torn between 2 impossible images, the sister I'd grown up with and the stranger unraveling in front of me. And I knew then this was only the beginning. The wail of sirens grew louder, slicing through the stunned silence in the room. My sister crouched on the carpet, clutching at the deflated belly, like it might magically refill, like the foam could still protect her. But my husband wasn't done. His voice shook, but his words landed like hammers. She wasn't pregnant, he said, glaring at her. She was hunting. Every eye snapped back to him. He was still pinned against the wall by my brothers, but his conviction forced everyone to listen. He shoved his phone toward them. The hospital security footage. You want proof here. He scrolled with trembling hands and pulled up grainy clips, my sister following a girl through sterile hallways. The same girl appearing again and again, her belly unmistakably swollen, her eyes downcast, always alone. She joined the teen pregnancy support group. He said, his words speeding up. For 2 months, she sat beside this girl, asked her questions, learned her schedule. She wasn't just pretending to be pregnant. She was preparing to steal that baby. Gasps rippled across the room like a shockwave. My aunt crossed herself. My grandmother clutched at her chest, whispering prayers. She knew the induction date. My husband continued, voice breaking under the weight of it. Tomorrow morning, 6 a.m. She even bought scrubs and a fake hospital ID. She planned to walk in during the shift change, take that girl's newborn, and claim it as her own. No, stop lying, my sister screamed, but her voice was cracking wild. You're making me look crazy. But the evidence was right there. Her laptop history, the receipts, the notebooks filled with schedules and forged documents. Even her boyfriend was shaking his head now, his voice a broken whisper. You painted the nursery. You told me I was going to be a father. His voice cracked, tears spilling down his face. What the hell have I been loving this whole time? My sister turned on him like a cornered animal, her eyes sharp, desperate. I did this for us. That baby was going to be ours. Ours. Don't you get it? The room erupted. Guests shouted, aunts cried, uncles yelled into phones. Police lights flashed through the window, painting the chaos in red and blue. And in the middle of it all, I felt my stomach drop to the floor. My sister hadn't just been lying. She had been planning, calculating, waiting. She was willing to tear a baby from its real mother just to keep her fantasy alive. And I realized in that moment, we weren't dealing with a liar. We were dealing with someone dangerous. The pounding on the front door shook the whole house. Before anyone could answer, police burst inside 2 officers with hands already on their belts, scanning the chaos. My sister tried to scramble backward, dragging the fake belly with her, like it could still shield her. But my father stepped forward, his voice hoarse. She's here? She's the one? The officers froze for a moment, taking in the scene, foam padding scattered on the floor, straps hanging loose like some grotesque costume family members shouting all at once. Then one of them bent down, grabbed the collapsed belly, and held it up by 2 fingers. His jaw clenched. This what I think it is, he muttered to his partner. Look at her laptop, my husband yelled, still shaking. Look at the receipts. She was planning to steal a newborn tomorrow. That was when my sister snapped. She lunged at him, nails curved like claws, screaming so loud her voice cracked. You ruined everything, she shrieked. That baby was mine. I deserved it more than some junkie kid. My brothers caught her midair and slammed her to the carpet, her knees hitting so hard the sound made my stomach twist. She thrashed, kicking, biting, spitting, her hair tangled and wild. The mask she wore for years, sweet daughter, excited sister, glowing mother-to-be, was gone. What remained was something raw, feral. The officers rushed in, forcing her arms behind her back while she wailed. She doesn't deserve that child. I would have given it a perfect life. You don't understand. None of you do. The neighbors had gathered outside, faces pressed against the windows, their kids clutching their legs. Phones were out. Cameras recording this nightmare already spilling into the world beyond our walls. When the cuffs clicked shut, the room went dead quiet except for my grandmother's ragged breathing. She whispered over and over, not my granddaughter, not my granddaughter, as if the words could undo what we all had seen. The detective who arrived minutes later looked through the scattered evidence, then turned to us with a face like stone. We need to contact the hospital immediately. The intended victim needs protection. Tonight. And that was the moment it sank in. My sister wasn't just faking. She wasn't just lying. She was hours away from becoming a kidnapper, a monster in her own bloodline. By the time the flashing red and blue lights faded from our driveway, the neighborhood was awake. Word spread faster than I thought possible. Before dawn, a local reporter was already calling my mom's phone, asking for a comment on the pregnant woman arrested at her own baby shower. Inside our house, silence had a weight to it. My sister's fake belly still lay crumpled on the living room carpet like some abandoned animal skin. Nobody wanted to touch it. Nobody wanted to claim it. It just sat there mocking us. I couldn't get the sound of her voice out of my head. That baby was mine. How convinced she sounded. How righteous. As if she wasn't trying to steal, but trying to save. At the hospital, security footage confirmed what my husband had uncovered. My sister had been shadowing a 17-year-old girl named Becca. No family, no visitors. She was scheduled for induction at 6 a.m. the next morning. My sister had picked the perfect target, vulnerable, isolated, invisible. The police acted fast. They moved Becca to a secure floor with guards outside her door, told her everything, and placed an emergency protection order that same night. While we sat in shock, that girl's life was being turned upside down too. She had no idea someone was plotting to walk out with her newborn. The fallout didn't stop there. By the next evening, our last name was splashed across every local news station. Headlines called it the fake pregnancy kidnapping plot. Reporters camped outside my parents' house. Strangers slowed their cars to take pictures of the porch where my sister had been dragged out in cuffs. My dad called into work sick, but everyone already knew. Co-workers whispered in break rooms. Mom couldn't set foot in the grocery store without people pointing. My grandmother didn't leave her bedroom for days, the blinds drawn, her Bible clutched to her chest. And yet, beneath the shame, something colder was sinking in. We hadn't just been tricked, we had been used. For months, my sister collected money for fake medical bills. Thousands of dollars from family and friends who thought they were helping her through a difficult pregnancy. Receipts surfaced, each one a fresh slap to the face. I sat awake that night, staring at the ceiling, hearing my sister's voice in my head. She doesn't deserve that child. Ask yourself, what would you do if the person you trusted most, the person you celebrated, fed, and defended, turned out to be building their own fantasy at the cost of an innocent baby's life? Because that's the question I couldn't escape. It didn't take long for the fractures to show. Within a week, our family group chat, once full of emojis and recipes, turned into a battlefield. Uncles demanded their money back. Aunts accused my parents of enabling her. Cousins whispered that maybe my husband had gone too far, punching her in front of everyone. My phone buzzed constantly with guilt-tripping texts. She's still your sister. Don't you think this has gone too far? Family doesn't betray family. But wasn't that exactly what she'd done? One uncle admitted he'd given her $30,000 over the past year, supposedly for OB appointments and prenatal vitamins. My grandmother confessed she'd written checks totaling $5,000 because she wanted the baby to have the best start in life. Every confession made the room colder. Each dollar handed over was another reminder of how deeply she'd woven her lies into our lives. Then came the older lies. Things we had all brushed aside at the time. The cancer scare 5 years ago when we shaved our heads in solidarity, only to discover later she had never set foot in the oncologist's office she claimed to see. Or the so-called nursing school acceptance that turned out to be nothing but smoke. We had dismissed those moments as attention-seeking small manipulations. Now we saw them for what they were: practice. Training wheels for something darker. Meanwhile, my husband faced his own consequences. The police said assault was assault, no matter the motive. He spent nights meeting with lawyers, days preparing for anger management classes, and every spare moment replaying that moment in his head. Did he stop a crime or commit one? Both could be true. And my parents? God, my parents looked like ghosts in their own house. My dad sat in his recliner, staring at nothing, whispering, "Where did we go wrong?" Mom flinched every time the phone rang, terrified of another reporter, another angry relative, another reminder of what her daughter had done. I wanted to scream at them. You didn't just miss the signs. You chose not to see them. But I swallowed it because what good would it do now? Here's the truth. No one wants to admit families are built on stories we tell ourselves. The story that we are close, that we are loyal, that we are safe with each other. My sister tore that story to shreds, and we were left staring at the bare bones underneath. By the time the arraignment came, the story had already spread beyond our neighborhood. Channel 7 ran a segment calling it the baby shower betrayal. Reporters parked outside my parents' house. Strangers left comments online debating whether my husband was a hero or a monster. In court, my sister sat at the defense table in County Orange, but she didn't look broken. She looked smug, like a director watching the chaos of her own script. The prosecutor laid out the charges, one by one: attempted kidnapping, fraud, identity theft, stalking. Each word felt like a hammer. Each count was years she might spend in prison. But then her lawyer stood up and said the words that made the air go still. My client intends to plead not guilty. She was acting in the best interest of the child. The courtroom erupted. Best interest of a baby she hadn't carried, hadn't birthed, hadn't loved? The prosecutor countered with evidence, photos of fake bellies, receipts for hormones to induce lactation notebooks tracking the teenage girl's every movement. The jury would later see surveillance stills of my sister trailing the girl through hospital corridors. But my sister's lawyer spun it like a defense of society itself. He painted her as a misunderstood woman who only wanted to rescue a child from an unfit teen. He used words like altruism, protection, higher purpose. And through it all, she sat there, chin high, eyes glittering, as if the narrative finally belonged to her again. Watching it, I realized something chilling. She didn't want a baby. She wanted the role, the applause, the validation of being seen as the perfect mother. She would rather burn her entire family to ash than admit she was wrong. Outside the courthouse, my husband was swarmed by cameras. Some reporters called him a savior, others asked if he felt guilty hitting a pregnant woman, even though we all knew she hadn't been pregnant. He gave no comment, jaw tight, as if speaking one word might unravel him. Inside, the case only grew uglier. Witness lists lengthened. More victims surfaced: women she had stalked, family members she had defrauded, friends she had deceived. Each new piece of evidence painted her less as delusional and more as calculating. Still, she didn't flinch. At the end of one hearing, she leaned across the table, looked directly at me, and mouthed, "You ruined everything." No, I thought. You did. The trial hadn't even begun, but the fallout was already devouring us. My dad collapsed at work one morning: chest pains, dizziness, a rush to the ER. The doctor said it was stress-induced, a minor heart episode, but the look on his face told me it was worth shame. He whispered over and over, "I raised a criminal." Mom didn't fare better. She stopped going to her book club, stopped answering the phone. Every trip to the grocery store ended in panic attacks because someone would recognize her as the mother of the baby thief. She shrank inside herself, living in shadows. Relatives began circling like vultures. Uncle demanded his $30,000 back immediately. My aunts wanted repayment too. Creditors called daily after discovering my sister had opened accounts in my name and maxed them out. My husband and I froze our credit, filed police reports, but the damage was done. Every time I opened the mailbox, it was another reminder of the holes she'd punched into our lives. Then came my husband's sentencing. The judge called his actions morally understandable, but legally unacceptable. Misdemeanor assault, 6 months of anger management, 100 hours of community service. He nodded, accepted it without argument. But later that night, I caught him staring at his fists like they were weapons he couldn't trust. And me, I couldn't stop replaying it either. The moment he hit her, the sound of knuckles on flesh or foam, my brain kept splitting in two. Gratitude for saving that baby. Horror at the violence it took. At dinner, when his hand brushed mine, I flinched before I could stop myself. He noticed. He always noticed. Our marriage began to feel like a mirror cracked down the middle. Love was still there, but so was fear. Meanwhile, my grandmother locked herself in her bedroom for days, curtains drawn, staring at nothing. She had handed my sister thousands of dollars for prenatal vitamins and OB visits. The betrayal carved her hollow. The shame spread through the family like mold. Each of us infected by her lies. Each of us wondering, how did we miss it? Did we ignore the warning signs because it was easier? The truth was ugly. Yes, we had. And now every lie we had brushed aside came back sharper than before. The fake cancer, the fake nursing school, the endless manipulation. She had been rehearsing this con her whole life, and we had been her unwitting audience. When the trial began in full, the air inside the courtroom felt suffocating. Cameras weren't allowed, but every seat was filled. Reporters sketched her face, jurors avoided her stare. And I sat there bracing myself for the worst version of my sister. The prosecutor laid out the mountain of evidence. The fake bellies, the receipts for hormones, the stalking logs, the stolen credit cards, the photos of Becca, 17, alone, unknowingly hunted. Every detail was a nail hammered into the coffin of my sister's defense. Then Becca herself took the stand, her newborn in her arms. She was trembling, voice cracking, as she told the jury about how my sister had infiltrated her support group, sat beside her at every meeting, asked questions that felt friendly at first and predatory later. When she described the night she learned someone planned to steal her baby, 3 jurors wiped their eyes, and when the baby started to cry mid-testimony, the whole courtroom went silent. It was the sound of innocence, the sound of everything my sister had tried to claim as her own. My sister couldn't contain herself. She slammed her hand on the defense table and shouted, "That baby should have been mine." The judge threatened contempt, but the damage was done, the mask slipped, and everyone saw the obsession for what it really was. My husband testified next, admitting he was wrong to hit her, but firm that he would never regret stopping her plan. The jury leaned in when he described following her, seeing her drink at a bar, instead of visiting a doctor, watching her buy prosthetics and scrubs. His voice shook, but his conviction didn't. After closing arguments, the jury deliberated only 3 hours. When they filed back in, I already knew. Guilty on all counts. The words rang like a church bell. My sister screamed, cursed, the jurors called Becca trash, and had to be restrained by bailiffs. My parents wept silently, holding hands like shipwreck survivors clinging to driftwood. The judge's gavel slammed down. But in my head, it was the sound of a door closing forever. Not just on her freedom, but on the story we had once told ourselves about who she was. Blood makes you family, yes. But this blood verdict, showed us something darker. Blood doesn't make you safe. 2 weeks later, we gathered again in that same courthouse, this time for sentencing. The air was heavy, as if everyone knew the words spoken that day would carve into stone the shape of our family's future. The prosecutor asked for 20 years. My sister's lawyer, now just a public defender doing his job, begged for leniency, citing her delusional disorder. But the judge wasn't swayed. He looked at her, then at us, and finally at Becca, holding her baby in the back row. 18 years, he said, with the possibility of parole after 10 conditional on psychiatric treatment. My sister laughed. Actually laughed. She told the judge she'd rather rot in a cell than admit she was wrong. It wasn't bravery, it was arrogance. And it chilled me to the bone because I knew she meant it. The guards let her out shackled and snarling, while Mom buried her face in Dad's shoulder. Grandma whispered a prayer under her breath, one that sounded less like hope and more like resignation. When we left the courthouse, reporters swarmed us. Microphones shoved in my face. Do you feel justice was served? I wanted to scream that justice is a cruel joke, that nothing restores the years of lies, the fear of stolen babies, the hollowed-out family dinners. Instead, I just said, it's over. But deep inside, I knew it wasn't. At home, silence hung like smoke. My father sat at the kitchen table with his head in his hands, repeating the same phrase, I raised a criminal. I raised a monster. Mom tried to reassure him, but her words were thin, almost transparent. And me, I stood in the doorway of my sister's old room. The bed was stripped bare, but the ghost of her presence clung to the walls. I thought about every lie she'd told, every mask she'd worn, and wondered if we had ever known her at all. Becca's baby was safe. Our community whispered less with time. My husband finished his anger management classes and started coaching at the youth center. Outwardly, life stumbled back toward normal. But scars don't heal in public. They hide beneath sleeves and smiles emerging in quiet moments when the house is dark. Even now, I sometimes wake at 3 a.m., convinced I hear a baby crying in the hall, even though I don't have children of my own. Ask yourself, What do you do with the ashes left after a fire that nearly consumed everything? Do you sweep them away and pretend the house is clean? Or do you let them sit as a reminder that fire always leaves something behind? For us, the ashes are permanent. My sister's name, the trial, the headlines, the whispers, and the knowledge that the person you trusted most can be the one who tries to burn your world down. That's the truth we live with now. Not closure, not peace, just ashes. Years have passed, and yet the echo of that baby shower still follows me like a shadow. It wasn't just a family gathering gone wrong. It was the moment the mask finally tore off. My sister wasn't a victim of circumstance. She was a predator dressed as family. People sometimes ask if I forgive her. I tell them forgiveness isn't a blanket you throw over broken glass. You can cover it, but the shards remain sharp. One wrong step and you bleed all over again. My parents still visit her, clinging to hope that one day she'll admit the truth. I don't. My last words to her were in that courtroom, and I intend to keep it that way. Because some doors once closed should never be reopened. Becca graduated last year. She's raising her daughter with more strength than most people twice her age. Watching her build a life from the ruins my sister tried to create reminds me that survival is its own kind of revenge. As for me, I've learned this blood doesn't define family. Loyalty does. Love does. And sometimes, the bravest act isn't saving someone. It's walking away when they keep choosing destruction. Ask yourself, what would you do if the person you loved most revealed themselves as your greatest threat? Would you still cling to them out of duty, or would you finally let go and protect what's left of yourself? That's the choice I made. And though it cost me a sister, it gave me something far more valuable, the freedom to live without her lies. Family doesn't always break clean. Sometimes it's splinters leaving jagged edges you learn to live around. But every scar tells a story. And this one, it will never fade. Thanks for watching until the end. Your support means everything. Stick around for more stories that prove truth is stranger than fiction.